Welcome to Behind the Brick Wall. I'm Sheila Beach, Executive Director at the Amesbury Chamber of Commerce, and today we are going to take you behind the scenes, literally behind the brick wall, in two of Amesbury's historic mill buildings. Thanks to our partnership with ACTV, we were able to provide this programming with generous sponsorship from Mountaintop Landscaping and Faulkner Commercial Group. Today I'm joined by my co-host, Janet Faulkner. Welcome.
Thank you, Sheila. Well, today we have two very different visits. We're going to the Upper Mill Yard, to Mill 2, and we're going to the Industrial Museum, which will be fascinating. And then we're going to 9 Water Street, and we're going to be speaking to Amy Vander Els. She's at the Artist Muse, and that should be so much fun and very interesting. So let's go.
All right.
Well, good morning, Kelly. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend this time to show us this museum. It's fascinating, and I can't wait to hear all about it. Tell me a little bit about when this opened and what you do here, and then we're going to have a million questions.
Sure, yeah. So technically this space opened in 2021, so many Amesbury people might be familiar with the Amesbury Carriage Museum, which has been around since 1986 as an organization, but we never really had a dedicated space. So in around 2019, 2020, the owner of this building that we're in, which is Mill 2, Greg Jardis, kindly donated this space to us. We just had to raise enough money to build out a community museum. So that was a multi-year project, and we were lucky enough to have really good community support, and actually during the pandemic as well, which I know is a challenge for lots of nonprofits. So we raised the money and built this space, and we dubbed it the Industrial History Center, because although people might be familiar with the Amesbury Carriage Museum, Amesbury has so much more history to talk about. So we really chose to not necessarily rebrand, but refocus all of the history topics that we can talk about with the community, because there's so much more.
It's true, everybody knows about the Carriage Museum, and this is less known, but it is such a great location right here in the Mill Yard, and it is so, that you have so much information packed in this little space. One of the things that that you had pointed out to me was this, the aperture on Amesbury and the display, and I love photography, so tell me a little bit about that, because I didn't know about that program.
Yeah, so Aperture on Amesbury is a project that we've been doing for a few years now, where we enlist the help of local, both amateur and professional photographers to sort of explore Amesbury's history and built environment with us. So we pick a topic each year. Last year it was Amesbury Then and Now. So we took photographers to different locations around town that had significant change to the historic landscape, and taught them about, what might have occurred there, or who might have owned that building, or particular, carriage or automobile made there. And then we sort of turn the photographers loose to use their creativity to sort of capture the space as a visitor to that space. So it's a project that we've had sold out each year. We keep it kind of small, so because we get a lot of photos from it. This year, 2023, the topic was the automobile landscape, which was actually also the topic of a walking tour we debuted. So most people know Amesbury Carriage Town for the carriage industry. And a lot of people might not realize Amesbury had a really pivotal role in the early automobile industry. So as the carriage industry was winding down in the 1890s and the horseless carriage was becoming a more popular option, a lot of carriage makers in Amesbury were able to make that switch to making auto bodies. We couldn't make the engines here in Amesbury because we didn't have the infrastructure or the skilled labor, but the design and makeup of early automobiles were very similar to the bodies and sort of the key parts of carriages. The first automobiles, if you've ever seen a picture of them, sort of just look like a carriage without a horse in front of it, which I always imagine would have been very funny for people to see sort of a carriage just moving along by itself. It must have been quite a sight for you if you'd only been used to seeing, horses pull them. So this year's topic was that early auto era, and it was really fun for us to be able to explore a topic that is Amesbury specific that has ties to national history. So Amesbury carriage makers made bodies for Buick, Cadillac, Rolls-Royce, Stanley Steamer, Pontiac, and we were really influential in that early auto era. Unfortunately, we were just too small to meet the demand. There were so many people that wanted an automobile. It was sort of an explosion of demand. So eventually the industry moved out to places like Detroit, but we have that really strong tie to early auto history and names that we all still recognize today.
And not only automobiles, but you were showing me that there were bicycles, and you actually have some of the original bicycles, even though that was such a small window of time. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, people of the past were really interested in transportation. So obviously we had the thriving carriage industry, and it's all sort of happening at the same time, but bicycles came about, and Amesbury particularly had a company called the Eastern Cycle Company, and they were only in business for a year and a half, 1895 to 96-ish. And for the longest time, we didn't think we had a complete surviving example of an Amesbury-made bicycle, because it's the type of thing that you might, throw in your garage or your carriage house and sort of forget about. But in the course of the same month, we had 2 people approach the museum and let us know that they had them in their barns or in their collection.
That's so interesting, within the same month.
Yes, it all sort of came together. So we were very excited to see them and to take a look at them. And they're sort of works of art. They have aspects of the Art Nouveau era. We were talking earlier about the lamps that are on the front of them, and the chain guards are very ornate. Some of them are made for ladies, some of them are made for men, and we were also fortunate enough to acquire some items or sort of accessories that you would have for your bicycle. So trouser clips for the men to clip their trousers so they didn't get caught in the bicycle. Little cyclometers so you could tell how far you went, little bike care kits. So all that stuff that we might have today that we think is modern technology, the people of the 1890s were very excited about too. So we didn't think that those bicycles existed anywhere, and they sort of just came to us all at once.
Well, you mentioned the lamps on but elaborate on that a little, because that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so carriages had lamps that were attached to the front, much like car headlights, and so similarly, bicycles had lamps if you were going to be bicycling at night or in the evening, and they're very ornate looking, and what surprises most visitors is that they were filled with kerosene and they had a wick. So you would essentially be driving or riding around on your bicycle with a kerosene lit lamp on the front, and I can only assume you would just hope that you didn't crash, because that could get a little dicey.
Not the safest.
No, but they're actually very pretty. They have different colored faceted glass on them, so I assume we have never lit any of ours just because we're not going to do that, but they probably would have been pretty to see, coming down the street.
That's excellent. And then you've got other things here, and we'll get some photos of them, but you've got this example of how the mills were powered by the water of the Powwow River, and I know also there's a photo of a Cadillac that is actually sitting right out here in the mill yard, and people see all these big mills, but it's so great to be able to put it together on all of what was going on here. It's terrific. So tell us a little bit about that, about how they utilize the Powwow River.
Yeah, so for as long as people have been, on this continent, they have been drawn to sources of water power. So the first in our area being the indigenous communities who still have a presence here, they were drawn to the Merrimack and the Powwow for transportation, for food resources, obviously for fresh water. So again, since people have been here, they've been drawn to that area. So when the settlers from the Massachusetts Bay Colony determined that this was a good area, they probably took a look at the Powwow and the Merrimack and immediately thought, grist mills and sawmills. So for the earliest people that settled in this area, those were two of the most important resources that they needed. They needed lumber to both build their own buildings and lumber to send back to England because there was a lumber shortage. And we're talking about like the 1630s, 1640s, 1650s. And then a grist mill. So you could grow your wheat, barley, oats, but you still needed to grind it into flour to make it into bread, which was a huge staple of historical people's diets. So those would have been two very important buildings to both find a site for and to build immediately if you're going to settle in a certain area. So our institution has actually done quite a bit of research on the sites of those original sawmills and grist mills. And we know that by about 1700, there are at least 5 sawmills and grist mills right along this section of the powwow. So the demand was there. So we've been using that water power since the beginning. And then a little bit later on, during the Industrial Revolution, as needs changed and technology advanced, mills started to be other types of mills. So oil fulling mills, a nail factory, sort of you name it, anything that could use water power started to pop up around the powwow. And that's because our section of the powwow that runs right through the mill yard here has about 100 feet of natural drop, which is very important. It's not actually the speed of the water, it's the velocity generated by the drop that makes it good for water power. So at the museum here, we talk about all the ways that Amesbury powered its industry, starting with people power, water power, steam power, electricity. So the mills are a really important part of that conversation because this is pre-electricity, and people of the past were not that different than we are today. We're looking for ways to make our lives easier and to not have to do maybe so much hand labor. So for people of the past, the river really represented a source of, untamed power for them, which is why we have so many mills right along the water here.
And it's so nice that it's all so accessible here because you can walk right out here, walk across from the parking lot, and you can see the power behind the water coming over that when you're going over that bridge and over that waterfall is just. It's just so spectacular, and it never gets old, right?
It doesn't.
We go by there all the time, and it's such a beautiful asset to this area. So you've got a big engine over here too, and I know you can't really turn around to see it, but we'll get photos of that as well. So tell us a little bit about that. Of some of the, it's considered modern. Right, that engine that's there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there was a period in time where sort of steam power, electricity, and gas power were all sort of vying for precedence in history. So steam engines are something that comes out of water power, and there were big manufacturers of them eventually, but a lot of the first steam engines that were made by small town tinkerers who, you could open a catalog and order yourself a tiny steam engine to put together and figure out how it worked. So eventually, as the demand for power in the mill buildings, especially textile mill buildings, although they're a little bit earlier, the demand for power outpaced what we had for water power here. So as technology advanced, steam power was embraced and eventually electricity came about. So it's sort of a progression over time that happened in a short period of time. So there would have been almost a little bit of each of those types of power going on all at the same time. And it got a little crowded here on the river, especially, during the Industrial Revolution as everybody's vying for a little piece of riverfront to power their various factories. The building that we're in right now, Mill 2, was part of a textile mill complex, which a lot of people know the mills around here, similar to places like Lowell and Lawrence, were generating textiles during the 19th century. So the importance of the textile industry in Amesbury really can't be understated, and we have a really important historical figure associated with the textile industry here in Amesbury. I don't know if you've heard of George McNeil, but George McNeil is considered the father of the 8-hour workday in America. He was a labor rights activist who worked in this very mill complex.
Really?
And in 1852, he participated in a strike where the textile workers in this building, who were mostly they were men and women. The men walked out on the job because their new factory floor manager wanted to take away their lunch privilege. So we're talking about people that worked from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Wow.
every day. About 900 people came through the archway out here. And so they walked out, and a 13-year-old George McNeil was amongst the workers that walked out, and that sort of started his career. He went on to write prolifically poetry and both be part of the American labor reform movement. So Amesbury has, a really pivotal piece of that history, and it's a point of pride that we can sort of sit in this building and say, the father of the 8-hour workday, which I sometimes wish was the father of the 5-hour workday, participated in that very important strike in this building. So
that's great. Now you have so much knowledge of all of this. What's your background?
Yeah, sure.
And tell us about your role specifically here.
Sure.
And your background.
So at the Carriage Museum and Industrial History Center, I'm the executive director here. We have a small, very dedicated staff, a program manager and an education coordinator, and we also have a board of directors here and many, many volunteers. And it's certainly a community-supported institution. I, many years ago, went to school for historic preservation and material culture, which focuses on preservation of historic structures, and also material culture is a fancy way of saying the stuff that people make. So looking at the stuff we make to learn about ourselves and our history, the evidence that we leave behind. So I did that for an undergraduate study, and then I have a master's in history museum studies. So that focuses more specifically on, how to run a museum. And then prior to coming to Amesbury, I was the curator at the Peabody Historical Society in Peabody, Mass. For 6 years. So a similar industrial town, which was nice for sort of the transition. Peabody was involved in the leather industry, which is its own whole, industry with its own issues, but similar shared New England history. So for me, it was a nice transition to a different part of industrial history.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's great. You bring so much knowledge. It's great. Amesbury is known for the hat factory, and of course for the carriages, for the cars. And I didn't realize there was such a textile industry here.
Yeah.
You mentioned how there were so many entrepreneurs really that came here, and it's so interesting because I know in my line of work, I deal with so many entrepreneurs, people that are looking for a location for their business. So to me, this is all really fascinating to see why people came to Amesbury and what they did here. So tell us about some of the educational programming that you have.
Sure. So since our space really only opened in 2021, and our history included mostly programming geared towards adults and focused on the carriage industry, we've really had sort of a blank canvas here to build out our programming to fit the needs of the community. So I myself have young children, and when I think about programming, I want to create programs that I would feel comfortable bringing my family to, my kids to, a space that was always open for the kids or the family to come in and tinker. So we do walking tours, we do exhibits, which are sort of sitting in the middle of one of them right now. We do field trips for grade 2 and grade 7 and 8. We actually have a partnership with the new elementary school here in town for an annual grade 2 field trip program. We send objects from our historic collections into the classroom called Hands-On History, which is something that we have. It's sort of a fun program. We have 5 historic objects that are no longer used in modern life. So the students get them, they handle them, they sort of try to figure out what they would be for. One of them is a wagon wrench, one is a niddy-noddy, which is something involved in textiles. And they're sort of funny. And then the students learn about them, see how they're used, watch a video of them being used, and then have to look at a historic artwork, and the item will be somewhere in the historic artwork. So we try to do history programming for kids that gets them involved in touching and using. And Amesbury's history really lends itself to that because industrial history is very sturdy and you can handle a wagon wrench. You're not gonna, most people I think of museums and they think of, china and silver and velvet ropes that you don't wanna cross.
Right.
But we really believe that history is more participatory. We're constantly making history. So we try to do hands-on programming, whether that's workshops for both families, kids and adults. And then we have, our typical, we have a winter lecture series, that kind of thing. But we're sort of a blank canvas for programming, and we've been trying a lot over the past year. Our next program coming up has Santa coming to the IHC. We're lucky enough to have Santa visiting this year. And he brings, meets children in an Amesbury-made sleigh, which is part of our collection that he gave to us after he was done using it. And he likes to tell the kids how Amesbury made the best sleighs back when he needed, a wooden one. So we try to do programming, like I said, that really involves hands-on, active sort of history making and participating, because we're all making history as we go, and we want it to be much more approachable and attainable for our visitors.
And not only making it available here, but also bringing it out into the community and into the schools. That's terrific.
Yeah, you'll see us downtown still with carriages at events. We still get asked to bring them many places. We recently had one at the high school for a trunk or treat. So we certainly keep that nod towards the carriage industry. A lot of Amesbury residents feel that pride, carriage town. So we have 18 carriages and sleighs. There's always one or two on display in the museum, but we're really using the space that we have to explore all the other ways that Amesbury's industries and people sort of functioned here over time. So it's an endless resource for very interesting local history.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that information with us. It's pretty fascinating, and it's really been a pleasure. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Janet.
it.
Yeah.
It's been great. That was so much fun and so interesting. So I had no idea that at Mill 2 they had so many great programs, that they had such an educational component and such an interesting museum there. So that was a wonderful opportunity. Now we're heading over to 9 Water Street, and let's go. Well, good morning, Amy. So glad to meet you and to see this space. Thanks so much for carving out time to show us around this morning.
Happy to invite you in.
Thank you. So we are here at 9 Water Street at the Artist Muse, and I've seen this space, I've seen the lights on. I really wasn't sure exactly what was happening up here, and I didn't know that it could be open to the public. So very happy to learn that and to see this interesting space. So Amy, tell us a little bit about what you do here, and it's so interesting and so cool. So tell us your story.
Yeah, I moved into this space in 2015. I had been teaching internationally as an art teacher and moved back to this area. And I actually got lost and turned around in this parking lot and saw the banner that said Artist Studios available, and called the number and rented this space in January of 2015.
Oh, so you've been here for quite a while.
Yeah.
8 years.
Yep.
Great.
Yep. So it's a shared space with 10 artists, mostly painters. It's a working studio. We got to open up last weekend for Open Studios, which is great to have the public in here and see what we do.
So tell us a little bit about what you do. What is your favorite thing that you do?
Oh, geez, I think
Or
it's
do you not have a
the
favorite?
variety.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mostly design jewelry, which I make here and sell here and online and to stores, mostly in New England. And then I also do encaustic painting, which is painting with wax. And I teach workshops in this space to adults. So, yeah, lots of different
Great.
things.
All of it is geared towards adults. You don't do any programs for youth?
Typically adults. I think the youngest I've had in here is probably high school age. I've done high school workshops, visiting schools. The medium has a torch, so it's working with fire.
Yeah.
So
it gets tricky.
Yeah, I kind of don't go too young with that medium.
So how long have you been making jewelry, and how did you begin that?
I think, so I was an art major, and as an art teacher, you're pretty okay at lots of things. And I had always been interested in jewelry design and had taken a number of adult sort of continuing studies workshops and metalsmithing classes. When I stopped teaching in 2014 and started sort of just creating whatever kind of came up, I found a whole bunch of silver that I had stashed away before I had then teaching internationally, and started just making some simple hoops and selling them at markets. And the jewelry really started to become popular, and I started getting into some stores, and just was a very organic start to this part of my life. And I just love it. I think it's, I have lots of different ideas. I feel like I never run out of ideas or things I'm curious about trying. And yeah, it's just something that's been a very organic step in my life.
And you create all your jewelry here?
Yeah.
Do you draw it first? Do you tell us a little bit about that process and how that happens here?
Yeah, I think a lot of people do sketch their work. I don't. I sort of sketch with the metal. You know, I'll have an idea in my head and just try to make it come to life. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. The way that I've imagined it, I usually, you know, kind of let it percolate and think about something for a while, and then I'll sit and design for a while, and then I'll wear it and see if it kind of isn't annoying and feels okay, and see if I get any compliments, and kind of know I've hit the mark. So.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So you do retail out of here as well, as this is where you design and create and also manufacture?
Yeah. Yeah. So I do sell out of here. I usually put a little flag that has my A logo on outside when I get here, so people in the town know that I'm here. And some people just make appointments and come by and do a little shopping day.
So when you have the flag out there, people are welcome to come in, to pop in and see your space.
Yeah, definitely.
Now you do all of your work here, so tell us about some of this. It's behind the cameras, so we'll get some photos of it, but tell us a little about some of the artwork, because it's so interesting, and it's such a wide variety.
The artwork that I do mostly now is it's encaustic painting, so it's actually wax. So I have a heated palette that I use that liquefies the wax, and I can paint it onto boards. Wooden panels. It's been a really exciting medium for me to learn. It allows you to be really versatile with what you do with it. So it's allowed me to bring a lot of my drawing, that I do a lot of figure drawing or landscapes or florals. It allows me to bring the drawing into the wax. Photography, it can be sculptural. It can, you can embed collage materials. So. Yeah.
And where did you learn that?
I learned it.
Where did you go to school?
So my undergrad and teaching degree were from UNH, and then the encaustic, I have taken workshops at Maine College of Art. So I took just continuing studies weekend workshops, and starting in 2015. So that was where I began to really learn the medium and knew I wanted to teach it as well.
And you did international teaching.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. Where did you teach, and how is that reflected in the art that you create?
My teaching career started in Lawrence, actually at Central Catholic High School, and a teacher that I had worked with when I was getting my master's degree had done international teaching, and it had sort of planted the seed. And I was really intrigued about the idea of teaching art internationally and being able to travel and live in other cultures. So I went to a job fair in Boston and got a job in Milan and was the high school art teacher there for 3 years. I taught the IB program, which is International Baccalaureate program, which I loved. And I then moved to Hungary. I went to Budapest for 2 years as a high school art teacher, and then I went to the Cayman Islands and it's a smaller school, and I was the 3rd through 12th grade teacher. So
wow.
I had 8 years old to 18 years old. Yeah.
Great. So do you feel like did that change what you did and how you created, or maybe the jewelry that you created? Or,
I think just being a teacher in general made me a better artist. I think when I was a student of art in college, I was pretty good at doing what the professor wanted, but I think I found my voice and my hand teaching, because I was trying to get the students to find their voice, and I found mine, I think, once I became a teacher.
Was there a favorite age? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Was there a favorite age that you taught?
I think I always loved high school. I think just the level that they can get to and the conversations that you can have, and you can really see them take risks. But when I was in the Cayman Islands, I was terrified of teaching third graders, and I ended up loving those younger ages too. Yeah, there's just such joy and freedom at that age. So I really loved both for different reasons.
Now, did you teach them drawing, painting, or a little bit of everything?
All of it.
A little bit of everything?
Yeah, ceramics, drawing, painting, collage, sculpture, you know.
And you have some beautiful pottery or sculpted pieces. Tell us about those.
I started taking classes at Purple Sage Pottery in Merrimack with Jenny Graff, who's become a really dear friend of mine. And so, I took classes for about a year and a half, just sort of relearning the wheel. I had taken pottery classes kind of all through my life, and this time around I really enjoyed working on the wheel and doing hand building. And Jenny and I did a little collaborative jewelry line where she did porcelain pieces and I did the metalwork. So yeah, it's been really nice to incorporate something different into the metalwork that I do.
Do you sell your jewelry in any of the local stores?
Yeah, Wild Dove in town, Valerie's Gallery in Newburyport, and then like 3S in Portsmouth and Taylor Mac in Kittery. So, and then it kind of go up to about Freeport and down Cambridge, I think.
Wow,
so,
great.
Yeah.
So people can find you online, and also, and you, did I hear that you do shopping by appointment as well?
Yeah, I mean, I put the flag out, so I'm here most weekdays, and you can kind of take your chances on finding me here, or you can reach out and set up a time to come in.
And how many different artists are in this space?
There's 10. We have a couple of shared spaces, and then, we have mostly painters. We have a woman that does repurposed quilts, a photographer. Yeah.
It's great. It's so nice to have all of that here. And you do the open studios every year.
Yeah, we just had that last weekend.
That's great.
Yeah.
What is how many employees do you have here? I hear people tinkering in the background.
Yeah. So my friend Sarah helps me design the jewelry, or not design, but produce the jewelry. Another woman, Hannah, has been helping me this last year, and my mom helps me a lot with tagging and labeling and kind of prepping orders for stores. So she's really organized. So
great.
Yeah.
Your space. So your space is here. Are you looking to add artists to the space, or are you at capacity here?
In my studio?
In the artist muse in general?
We're at capacity right now. Yeah, it's. I feel like in the last couple of years it's really changed in Amesbury, where it's kind of hard to find a studio space now. We had a little bit of turnover this spring and have 3 new artists that have been great additions to the space.
So it's a great busy little hub.
Yeah. I don't think not looking to add unless somebody decides to leave. So we're at capacity right now.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
We're going to take some photos of some of the jewelry that you have. Any stories behind any of these pieces that you've created? Any of your favorites?
That's a great question. I love big dangles. So my favorites are sort of the larger, I like sort of mixed metal, silver and brass dangles. So I'm wearing kind of a smaller pair for me. So.
And do you ever custom make for someone's particular preference?
Depends.
Okay.
If it fits sort of what I do.
Okay, so we'll have to talk about that after.
I have started doing wedding bands, so that's been fun to work with couples and design bands together. So
great.
That's probably the most custom work that I do.
But you do some custom.
Yeah. Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And how many people do you think you have come through when you do the open studio?
I have no idea. It was so busy this weekend. I feel like I barely could eat lunch. You know, it was constantly 6 or 7 people in here.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I'm terrible at guessing numbers. I would say 1 million people were in here last weekend, but it's probably like 1,000.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time
thank you for coming
to show what you've got here and let us into your little world and show us all your creations. So thanks so much. It was really nice to meet you.
You too.
Thanks, Amy. Well, that was so much fun and so informative. I learned so much about the Industrial Museum in the Upper Mill Yard. Kelly did a wonderful job explaining what they do and what they have to offer. And it's such a wonderful nonprofit, so that was such a great choice. And then our visit to Amy Vander Els' shop at the Artist Muse was just fantastic. I mean, who knew that there was so much going on there behind that brick wall?
No, I love all these hidden gems in Amesbury behind these brick walls. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Behind the Brick Wall. Thank you again to our sponsors, Mountaintop Landscaping and Faulkner Commercial Group. We appreciate your support and we look forward to filming the next episode of Behind the Brick Wall.
Great. See you next time. Thank you.